This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Bruchim Aboam. We continue in Mishna Berura, Daf Hashavua, Siman Yud, Sif Tes. Yesterday we had a good one. Yesterday, if you didn't get a chance, we discussed undershirt tzitzis and other important subjects. Today we learned Sif Tes. The corners need to be squared and not circular. Says the Mishna Berura, Shiur merubos de'ein eagle nikra kanaf. Circle is not called a corner. That ain't a corner. Now, let's see the Bir Halacha v'lo shiyu agulais. Tzarachiyun ad kama nikra b'shem agulais. What is considered circular? I mean, if you bring in a magnifying glass, you'll see that it's not really square, it's somewhat circular, and especially if we take a microscope, we'll see that it's not perfectly square. So at what point is it considered circular? It's not logic, it's not mistab, it's not reasonable that because it's not perfectly sharp that it's pater from tzitzis. The corner of the tzitzis should not be more important and more strict than the square requirement. We know that the mizbeach being square and the corners being square is ma'akev. That if the corner gets a little niched, less than a tefach or less than size is kosher. V'loy nizkar shum nafkamina beinam nifkam b'makom chudoy shel keren b'shar magam zech mashan b'chol gavnei kshera. It doesn't seem to matter whether the notch is in the corner or somewhere else. V'ayin b'sukkah daf mem tesem alaf b'toyses d'maser shekol datam d'loy badam el adayin shem ribua. If it's less than a tefach or less than a kazayis, it's still considered square. So maybe the same thing by tzitzis. If it's less than a tefach or less than a kazayis, because the thing is, the mezech is much bigger, so that would not be a fair comparison. The Chafetz Chaim does not have a definitive approach over here. Now, what I'm thinking immediately is, well, let's try to compare it to tefillin. So later on, the Dirshu says regarding tefillin that also have to be square. There, the Mishna Berura says in Siman Lametes, Sivkatan Lametes, it's pashut pegima ketana kedei chagiras tzipayr and eina pesach sasirbushlan v'chemat yoyser. There, just a nail's worth is not going to passel. Now tzitzis is bigger than tefillin, so it's mistaber that if it looks square, it's a square. If it looks circular, it's a circle. But the Chafetz Chaim does not give a definitive definition. Sif Yud. Mitznefes Petura. Hats are pater. You know, that's a good thing, by the way, because imagine if you'd have to put tzitzis on your hat. Afilu shel arba. Afilu shel artzos hamarav. Even of the western lands. Sheshnei Rashem meshulacham akesveim begufam. You know, you saw the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church filed an official petition against the Haredim yesterday in Jerusalem. But his hat is what we're talking about. You know, what's that guy's tachlis? That guy's tachlis is for this sif in Hilchos Tzitzis. That guy came down to this world just so that we should have a picture of what we're talking about, where sort of the back ends, the front ends are on his shoulders. So it's like a hat and a whole, it's a whole costume. Even though his head and the majority of him are covered, pater, it's pater from tzitzis. Why? Because it's a hat, it's not a garment. The ikar purpose of that garment is to cover his head. Your clothing. A hat is not clothing. Says in the Mishna Berura, Sivkatan Lam Beis Kivan Sheikara, Heichin loy mitchila rak b'shvil kisei rosh. It was prepared, it was created to cover the head. It was not created to cover the body, even though it covers his shoulders and the majority of the body, but it's a hat. You get it in a hat store. You don't get it in the garment store. V'lo ksus harosh. And not the ksus harosh. Now, by the way, the Bir Halacha brings that from the Malbim, that he disagrees with the Mishna Berura, or at least with the Mechaber, that he says that if you cover your head and the majority of your body, you're chayv in tzitzis. And he asks many questions on the Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishna Berura and the Bir Halacha says that in kedai lazus mipsak ha Mishna Berura, and if you want to see further, you could see the Bir Halacha. But I want to discuss now the issue where the Mechaber is defining that tzitzis are only chayiv in a garment that covers the body, not something that covers the head. So now the question is, the Atara, the notorious Atara. Can you have an Atara on your Talis? Are you allowed to? Bnei Yeshiva are makbid not to have an Atara on the Talis. We're talking about a silver Atara. Why? Because if you're going to put an Atara, you're indicating the ikar part of the Talis is the kisei harosh. And if you do so, then you're not makayim the mitzvah of tzitzis, because the ikar is the kisei haguf and not the kisei harosh. So what you could do is you could tell your shver, do me a favor. I want a silver Atara on the top, and I want a silver band going across the middle. So if you want to charge the shver now with inflation and all the costs, it's going to cost you about $9,000 to get a proper talis. You could do that, and then I would recommend you sell it and you invest it, and you could probably live off the interest for some while. But that's the shaila. Can you have an Atara? So the Mishna Berura says, people make an Atara on their talis. Not because its primary function is to cover the head. Only so that there is a inyan that you don't flip around the talis, that what remains on the top is always on the top, and what's on the bottom should be on the bottom. That Rizal says such a hanhaga we learn out from the krushim of the Mishkan, that the krushim in the north should always be in the north. V'ayin le'el siman chesif katan tesko sad shari lo yo makvid al zeh v'chein machriel yarab l'hakel im nikra l'mala v'chayotze b'zeh, to flip it around. It's not the biggest deal in the world. Now the truth is, every talis has an Atara. Every single talis has like a silk piece on top. So that the Mishna Berura is not talking about silver. Because in times of Mishna Berura, they couldn't afford a silver Atara. That was like, 10 years worth of salary. They're not spending that kind of money on a Atara for a talis. But regarding an Atara on the talis, the Dirsha brings down to make a silver or gold Atala. The Aruch HaShulchan says you shouldn't do it. It's not kedai, because it looks like the ikar part of the talis is the kisei harosh, and it's not. The ikar is the chelek shal haguf. Rav Moshe says that from the Achronim it's muchach that you're allowed to make an Atara of gold or silver. And according to the reasoning of the Mishna Berura, you want to know which part should remain on the top. It's mistaber. There's no major chiluk between silk Atara or a gold Atara or a silver Atara, so you could follow your particular custom. But that's the potential issue with making an Atara. Okay, Rabbi Sar, we're going to hold it over here for today. We'll pick it up tomorrow in Sif Yud Aleph. Wishing everybody a wonderful day. Bracha v'hatzlacha. Kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.